This man kneeled on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you imagine that?
George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! However, any
Louisville police shot and killed 26-year-old Breonna Taylor in her apartment during what her family calls a botched drug raid.
Breonna Taylor was hit multiple times by gunfire and died at the scene.
22-year-old Stephon Clark was shot and killed by police in his grandmother's backyard. However, investigators found no weapons at the scene, only an iPhone.
Protesters clashed with police over the deadly shooting of Philando Castile last Wednesday.
5 police officers firing
Around the United States, there is outrage over the police shooting of Michael Brown.
As officers held him down on the ground.
And they shot and killed him for it.
I can't move.
I've been waiting the whole time, man. Get up, get in the car.
Mama.
Get up and get in the car right.
I can't. That's stupid. My stomach hurts. My neck hurts. Everything hurts. Get some water or something. Please. Please.
Are you serious? Bro, are you serious? And you gonna keep your thing on your neck? Yeah, I bet you. Justice! No justice! No peace! No justice! No justice!
We're gonna try today. We are a physical representation of our support for George Floyd.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear. Lots of children have no fear. That's the closest way, that's the only way I can describe it. That's not all of it, but it is something to really, really feel.
George Floyd, a father, a brother, a son. Another unarmed black man killed at the hands of police. In the midst of a global pandemic and a chaotic presidency, Americans got to see the ugly underbelly of policing communities of color once again. The circumstances are all too familiar. Officers escalating a situation when it is not needed.
When I saw the videotape, the murder of Brother George Floyd, it filled me with a rage. And it reminded me of when I saw Oscar Grant's video and his murder. It reminded me of when I saw Philando Castile. It was like, enough is enough. But it's been enough. It's been ridiculous. It's been beyond the pale of what any civilized society should tolerate.
I think for a lot of us who have been involved in this for a while, you know, it made us feel like we were looking at a lynching. Now, for people who hadn't slowed their life down enough to see that, I think they were shocked at what they were seeing.
Incomprehensible that something like that could happen. I don't know about you personally, but I hate to say it, it reminded me of some of the older guys that I worked with at MPD. It almost seemed as if he enjoyed what he was doing, and you knew that it was wrong.
You know, I'm sick to my stomach to think that, you know, that something like that could just happen, you know, over and over again, you know, and it's like, you know, I mean, you don't get the right to kill somebody. You don't get the right to abuse somebody.
But watching the video of George Floyd's death, slow, painful, excruciating, just was searing for me, as I know it was for so many families across the country, so many so many people of all colors, to watch somebody die in such a callous, unfeeling way in slow motion, to hear him calling out for his mom, to say, "I can't breathe." It's not as though he didn't try to communicate. He was very clear about what was happening to him. And I think as millions of people around the country and the world, just wondered what in the world were those officers thinking? How could they be so callous about another human being's life?
Today, I filed an amended complaint that charges former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin with murder in the second degree for the death of George Floyd. Second, today, arrest warrants were issued for former Minneapolis police officers J.A. King, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao.
I can't watch that video. I've seen so many murders now on camera. What I can tell you is that the image that is emblazoned behind my eyelids is the one where the officer is kneeling on his neck and he's looking directly into the camera and he has his hand in his pocket as if he's casually kneeling down to pick up a penny.
Any excuse that may rest in the conscience of anyone that may have doubt as to George Floyd's fault or participation in anything, that had no legs to stand on. Because he was not posing a threat. He was there on the ground, really helpless, and he still died.
All the times they've had police killings on video, and you know that they've had lots of police killings that weren't on video, there's always been big uproars. But I think this one has packed a more powerful punch because people are now at home, with nothing to do, no distractions.
Seeing someone lose their life for over 9 minutes shakes the very core of our humanity. Disregard of an innocent life adds to that despair.
I think there was a few things that came into focus in this moment that have created the conditions where we are now. So, for a month or so prior to the George Floyd murder, we had a lockdown. People were in their homes who could be in their homes and connecting with each other through screens in a completely different way. So that's a part of it, right? We're starting to see into every aspect of people's intimate lives and also glued to the television or to our screens to better understand what we can do to protect ourselves against a plague, if you will, that the president was calling a liberal hoax from the very beginning. Then you couple that with Ahmaud Arbery's murder. So I think people were already like, first of all, how are we just seeing this and this happened, a month prior to getting this video, and the people still haven't been charged, and then all this stuff comes out about them, about what they believe, right? And then, of course, you see this video, and I think what actually happened is that there's a muscle memory that people have now around police violence and protest. So it's not the first time this has happened. And it's not new to us, but I think over the last 7 years, we now have a consciousness that it's not enough to just watch it and be upset about it. That coupled with 4 years of a president who has literally opened the sewer grates and told white nationalists to come up out of the sewer and come be a part of our society, be a part of our government. I think all of those things have collided in such a way where people now, it's not just people turning up about police brutality and police violence. You notice, you can't spin this story any other way. Who comes out when there's protests? White militias. Who's driving through crowds in protests? White nationalists who are unabashed about their point of view. And who have the cover of the federal government.
Go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel.
My whole life's work has been about trying to figure out how do we keep Black people from experiencing the worst of the system while we are at the same time still experiencing an unbroken history of white supremacy, racial hierarchy, and state violence. I mean, I'm part of a Black church. I argue the Black church has 400 years of receipts of fighting against white supremacy every day. Every day Black folk in church wake up, we fighting against white supremacy.
Of a TV station, but look around, here goes the sound of a record. Boom and pound, when I shut them down, I shut them down, shut them down, shut them down, I shut them down, shut them down, shut them down, I shut them down, shut them down, shut them down, I shut them down, shut them down, shut them down, I shut them down, shut them down, shut them down, shut them down. We can't get justice!
The slow murder of George Floyd forever changed the city with a history of excessive use of force. It changed America, and it shocked the world. A nation in crisis. Our cities have burned. Lives have been taken. The voice of the oppressed rise up when those voices go unheard.
When they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken.
Attention, this is the Oakland Police Department. You have the right to peacefully assemble to express your First Amendment rights.
A movement started less than a decade ago takes front stage once again. It seems like it was only yesterday when the streets of America were filled up with similar protests and outrage from the killings of Oscar Grant, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Eric Garner, Stephon Clark, Laquan McDonald, and Sandra Bland. This time it was different. But why?
I think there are a couple of things. I think the first thing that I'll say is we have a generational divide, or should I say a generational uprising. If you think about Trayvon Martin in 2012, those teenagers and let's say young people that are now protesting, let's say if they're 22, 21 years of age, they were 13 years of age when that happened. And they were already accustomed to being on their devices. And they probably had questions then. And now, after the string of events from Trayvon Martin to Michael Brown, to Eric Garner, to Philando Castile, to Walter Scott, to Jordan Davis, to Laquan McDonald, and the list continues, Alton Sterling, the list goes on and on. At some point, I think as a 13-year-old, you may ask the questions, but now as you begin to live and maybe your cognitive reasoning is developing, you begin to ask questions because you're outside of your parents' home and now you're thinking for yourself. And so maybe you're saying that maybe something is wrong. So I think that there are questions that are unanswered.
I didn't know what I wanted to do in 4 years of college. I was like, I just want to help people and I want to, make my community better. So when I was done with college, I came home and decided to make an impact where I live. And I learned actually how to organize and build power here on the streets of Oakland. I started knocking on doors, talking to people with an organization that had initially started by fighting police brutality and police violence. 10 years of organizing in San Francisco, 5 or 6 years of organizing here in Oakland. And at a certain point, I felt it was important to get a clearer sense of what the landscape was nationally. It's fine to be a big fish in a small pond, but there's a lot you miss about the way that the world works and the way the country works. I joined an organization that organizes domestic workers. These are women who clean homes, who care for the people that we care for the most. My mother and my grandmother did domestic work. And it was a few short weeks before I joined that organization that I helped to create Black Lives Matter. No, I did not know that Black Lives Matter would become the force that it is today. Although I certainly want to say that it was something that I wished for, but couldn't see beyond my own faith that it could happen and my own determination that we should try it. We should try to figure out how to create the kind of movement that could actually have impact for Black folks. Patrice and Opal and I, when we created Black Lives Matter, we started building these platforms for people who were angry about Trayvon being murdered and his killer being acquitted. And we wanted people to do something more than be angry on social media. We wanted people to do more than argue with each other about whether or not it was racist on social media. Because at the end of the day, that kind of liking, retweeting, sharing, arguing back and forth with somebody you've never met doesn't change policy, it doesn't change culture, it doesn't change the fact that mothers all over this country are dealing with deep losses as a result of our failure to actually deal with what it means to keep our communities safe and who is responsible for that. There have been protests happening all over the globe, more protests than the whole last period of civil rights. And here we are, and you can't get anybody at the top of the ticket to acknowledge that all around them, people are turned up about the fact that Black people are being left out and left behind.
There have been many protests against police brutality and systemic racism in America's history. Some protests were a result of a community overwhelmed by the actions of law enforcement and the lack of accountability in the criminal justice system.
The only persons on the streets of Miami's riots are police, looters, and torchmen setting dozens of fires that are now burning out of control.
There are people being beaten. There is looting. It is a dangerous night in the city of Los Angeles.
Today's protests have come in many forms, from everyday citizens taking to the streets to activists launching social media campaigns. Modern-day athletes have leveraged their influence in exercising their right to protest peacefully, putting their livelihood and safety on the line.
I mean, ultimately, it's to bring awareness and make people, realize what's really going on in this country. There are a lot of things that are going on that are unjust, people aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change. That's something that, this country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all, and it's not happening for all right now.
Colin Kaepernick, he actually told a group of reporters yesterday that he's received death threats.
Everybody, and I mean everybody, can give back. It's our duty to help our neighbors. Walter Payton spent time with my coach, which in turn ended up having a strong impact on me, motivated me to try to have an impact on the world. We should all strive to be more like Walter Payton. Thank you, God bless. When we grew up in Denver, which is not a predominantly Black area, the one thing I learned to do at a young age is I learned that some people might perceive me as dangerous. But I was taught that, hey, people might see you as a threat. So I naturally started putting on a big smile. As soon as I seen anybody, me flash a smile, let them know that I'm a friendly person. But, I feel like, the issue when it comes to, police brutality, a lot of it is deep-rooted in the stigma of what a black person represents. The idea of the Constitution, the idea of America is special. The problem is that America's never really lived up to the Constitution as a whole, not for everybody that lives in America. And I tell people all the time, I'm proud to be American. I grew up American, and I have no problem with being an American. I want to be American. I'm proud to be American. But America needs to do better for its people, and it's a real issue.
When I was a student at Bible College in 1999, I was physically and sexually assaulted by police officers. So I was a victim of police brutality while I was attending Bible college to be trained as a minister. And that trauma, that sexual and physical trauma at the hands of the police officers really forced me to have my own internal reckoning with how will I use my own call and my mission as a man of God, as a minister, as a community leader, to dismantle these systems. And that's what my work has been for the last 20 or so years. Well, obviously, after it happened to me, I was devastated. I was living with my pastor at the time in San Jose, and on my way home, and two officers pulled me over, pulled me out the car, grabbed my groin area, did a pretty much strip search on me with a gun, trained on me, and told me if I was black, if I was in Alabama in 1950, they'd throw me in an empty field. One of them said it was gonna break my effing neck. So I came out of that experience with wounds in my body that I still see today, from the handcuffs, the bruises. My spirit was deeply broken and traumatized. I was asking God why this happened to me. I'm out here on my way to heaven and so glad, But my young people told me in our Bible study some weeks later, this happened to them all the time.
In the 50-shot killing of Sean Bell, an unarmed man, on his wedding day. They were seriously wounded in the hail of gunfire. The shooting incident sparked strong reactions throughout the city, leading up to
Sean was my middle son. His gift from God was to play baseball and also to be an electrician. About maybe 3:45, I get a phone call saying Sean was in an accident. So the first thing I thought, okay, maybe a car accident, because he was the driver in the car. So I'm jumping up, getting ready, get to Jamaica Hospital. That's where I used to work. And when they escorted me, I'm seeing a lot of people outside the hospital. And when they escorted me to this room in the hospital, I knew that was a room that was gonna tell me something bad has happened to our son. Hearing 50 shots at his car,
November 25th, 2006, as he was leaving his bachelor party with two friends.
You have Sean Bell. He's going to get married. They're at a strip club, and they're undercover officers in the strip club who think they hear that someone has a gun. They go outside, and there's like a confrontation. Bell's in the car, and 50 shots.
Like I said, that was the most horrific day, horrible day of my life. But I continued. That day, I couldn't believe, thinking that the wedding was supposed to be that night, 7 p.m. at La Bella Vita. Going to the beauty parlor, still thinking I'm going to a wedding. In void, in undisbelief, knowing what happened to my son.
Prosecutors said Sean Bell died needlessly at the hands of reckless New York City detectives. But the defense strategy was to discredit the civilian eyewitnesses one by one, to portray the surviving victims as lying opportunists, and the detectives as the only honorable, reliable witnesses.
During that time, hearing everything, on April 25th, 2008, I'm thinking, okay, the judge is gonna say guilty, guilty, because some things the judge said I could believe that was against the officers. No, after everything was said and done, not guilty.
Bell's family, the bitterness over the trial's outcome will most likely not fade away anytime soon. Hundreds of people spent the day outside the courthouse in Kew Gardens today. Many supporting the family, some so overcome by emotion they collapsed
police union,
in the street.
They say they're grateful for the acquittals.
This sends a message to New York City police officers that when you are in that position, when you are in front of that court bench, that you will get fairness.
How do I spell relief? N-O-T-G-U-I-L-T-Y, not guilty.
Judges, DAs, the police department all work hand in hand, and that's something that needs to be stopped.
Driving while black, a phrase all too familiar amongst African Americans. Deadly traffic stop encounters between black men and women and police are too commonplace. These tragic deaths usually end in the acquittal of officers or no charges at all.
Hello, sir. Good. How are you? Good. Reason I pulled you over, your brake lights are out. So you only have one active brake light, and that's going to be your passenger side one. Your third brake light, which is up here on top, and then this one back here is going to be out. You have your license and insurance?
I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
Philando Castile, a 32-year-old school nutritionist, is shot and killed by former officer Geronimo Yanez.
We got pulled over for a busted tail light in the back. And the police he's covered. He killed my boyfriend. He's licensed, he's licensed to carry. He was trying to get out his ID and his wallet out his pocket, and he let the officer know that he had a firearm and he was reaching for his wallet, and the officer just shot him in his arm.
His death is filmed and streamed live all over the world as his girlfriend and a 4-year-old daughter watch him die.
Philando did nothing wrong. This man said, I have, a license to carry, and he went to get his documents and he shot 5 times. Like, why?
Court records dating back to 2002 showed that Philando averaged more than 3 traffic stops per year.
My name is John Choi, and I have the great honor of being able to serve the people of Ramsey County, Minnesota as their elected county attorney, which includes the city of St. Paul and the surrounding suburbs. I was first elected in 2010, and so I've been in office since that time. In many instances, what I see happening in deadly force cases is that the officer actually created this situation by not following their training. There are many cases across America where if the officer acted differently, if they didn't assume that everybody around them was some deadly threat to them, that we would have very, very different outcomes. The Tamir Rice case in Cleveland strikes a chord where that particular officer created that situation, and they didn't have to end up shooting that boy. The case in my jurisdiction involving Philando Castile, the same thing, where he had all of these assumptions and he raced towards using deadly force when he didn't have to. Everything was telling him that he didn't have to. There was a young child, a 4-year-old child in that car. There was a woman with Philando Castile in that car. Why on earth would any human being shoot an officer in that particular situation? And the way that Philando disclosed beyond what the law ever required him to do. But he said, "Sir, I have to tell you that I do have a firearm on me." He said it that way, in the most disarming way. And for some reason, the officer raced to this conclusion that he was about to be shot.
Philando Castile, if you remember, in Minnesota, I believe he was pulled over 35 or 40 times. And many of those were because there was a warrant for his arrest, which sounds terrible. But actually, the warrant was for an unpaid court fee.
Yanez, a Minnesota police officer who fatally shot Philando Castile during a traffic stop last year, has been found not guilty of all 3 charges, including second-degree manslaughter.
Jurors found Yanez was reasonable in his decision to shoot. The jury also found him not guilty in 2 other counts of endangering Philando Castile's girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, and her child.
Hours after a jury acquitted Yanez, Philando's mother, Valerie Castile, led protesters, shutting down parts of the city. The chant of "Philando, Philando" rang out as they marched down the highway in the dark of night.
What is it gonna take? I'm mad as hell right now. Yes, I am. My firstborn one son died here in Minnesota. Under the circumstances, just because he was a police officer, that makes it okay. Oh, now they got free reign. He's found innocent on all counts. He's shot into a car with no regard to human life, and that's okay. Thank you, Minnesota.
Yanez was allowed to resign from the force, only to take another law enforcement job in another city. Today's stories are anything but a recent phenomenon.
I was asked to volunteer as kind of a statistical consultant for a statewide task force to look at traffic stops. And it turns out the state of North Carolina was the first state in the nation to mandate collecting data on every traffic stop, but nobody had ever looked at it. 5 years later, 7 years later, I think we published a book and finally got our hands around it. It was very difficult to work with, but the initial findings were that a black man has about twice the odds of being pulled over compared to a white man. And once they're pulled over, they've got about twice the odds of being searched after a routine traffic stop. And the experience of an African American in North Carolina is, is 4 times more likely just by getting in the car that that drive down the street is going to lead to a search of the vehicle. And a search of the vehicle implies that the police officer has determined for some reason in his mind that you pose a potential threat or that you are a suspect in some kind of criminal proceeding. Because if you're merely speeding or you ran through a stop sign, that doesn't mean that the officer needs to search your car. It's humiliating, it's alienating, it can cost a lot of money. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen associated with what we think of as a routine traffic stop.
Oh man, I'm scared as heck.
You were just stopped
I was just stopped about a month or so ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm just scared, and I'm not. My license is legit. My car is inspected. I'm not riding dirty, But it's just that thing that goes through you when you're being stopped. And he's like, "Well, why are you so nervous?" Why not? When you look at the news and TV and see the things that are going on, yeah, I'm nervous.
No, I can't call them if you don't open the door. Why can't you? Because I will not put my...
Use your phone. It's in your lap right there.
I just don't want to put my hands down. I'm really sorry.
You just look what's wrong.
No. I've just seen way too many videos of problems.
But you're not black. Remember, we only kill black people. Yeah, we only kill black people, right? All the videos you've seen, have you seen any white people get killed? You have.
New video tonight of an officer-involved shooting in Vallejo. It is disturbing. You hear the moment when 6 officers opened fire at a Taco Bell drive-thru, killing a local rapper.
Yo, there's like fucking 7 cops out here. They just blocked the drive-thru.
Gun.
The guy over there doesn't want to come out. I don't know why.
What? There's a gun in his lap. I'm gonna bust that fucking window. All right, car's locked. He's passed out, but the car is in drive. We need another unit. Keep your hands up!
And as you'll see here is the car in the drive-thru during this welfare check. Police pull in front and behind the car. The driver fast asleep during this time, and then police realize he has a gun on his lap.
He's not up yet. Hey, keep your hands up! Vallejo, David, 3 shots fired. Crossfire. Start code 3 medic. Let me see your hands! Put your hands up! All the officers are okay. Start code 3 medic.
Copy now. Medic is en route. Code 3 at this time. All units are okay.
Willie McCoy, a 20-year-old aspiring rapper, is tragically shot and killed by police while sleeping in his car. 55 rounds by 6 officers surrounding his car were fired, killing him instantly.
Murder. Pure, unequivocal murder. These are officers who are supposed to be there to protect and serve. So the lens that they should be looking at this through is, what is going on with this person? Why are they unconscious? Is this a medical emergency? And if it's not, and the brother just fell asleep, whether he's intoxicated, he's drunk, or whatever it might be, or he's tired from work, I mean, that's also a way to look at this, somebody who needs help. Instead, they came with a punitive, criminalistic perspective, which is, this is a criminal. And then they can't claim the idea that there was a gun, which you can't see in the video, and they claim that it's a gun. But before that, what's very crucial to understand is that they had already communicated what their intent was. If he moves, we're taking him out.
His death is all too common in a town with a notorious record of police violence against young black men and women. More deaths and shootings against unarmed black and brown citizens. The list goes on and on.
The officers thought the SUV the pair had just gotten out of was stolen. Police say they're looking into what happened, but deny any kind of racial profile.
I've been drinking. Okay. I don't care about, I can walk home. I just don't want to be in violation of anybody. I can walk, my sister's house is right here.
Will you take a preliminary breath test for me?
Yes, I will.
Okay, just wait here while I grab it.
The individuals involved in his murder took away a man with children who depended upon their daddy on a daily basis.
Judy Scott, the victim's mother, clutched a picture of him in court today. She turned to Slager and said, "I forgive you." Slager began to cry. He told the court, "With my actions that day, Walter Scott is no longer with his family, and I am responsible for that."
There is a stark difference in the way that law enforcement deals with traffic stops in other communities, where officers have de-escalated the situation or used non-deadly force.
In the car.
Ma'am, I said you don't understand why
I'm not a ma'am.
Well, I'm being polite.
Why are you in an unmarked car?
Okay, because I'm a part of the aggressive driver unit.
Do you have the power to do that?
Yes, I do.
Well, you're a double.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate
You're welcome.
It's remarkable to see how the officer remained polite to the woman, even as she disrespected him.
No wonder you people get shot. You're absolute asshole.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Sir, go back into your car. I'll be with you in a second.
You better check the registration on this plate soon, mister.
Have a good day, Judge.
You bet.
Black communities historically have a deep-rooted fear of being treated unfairly by police.
3 of the accused officers were acquitted of all charges, but the jury hopelessly deadlocked on one charge of excessive force under color of authority.
4 policemen did it. 4 policemen violated the law. Let's deal with that.
The anger is all over this nation. If this kind of event could happen to Rodney King, all of our lives, those of us who stand here this morning, could have been in that same position that he was in.
The history of the police started in colonial times before the founding of the United States. For 400 years, black people have been criminalized by policing. Based on America's slavery past, slave patrols served as police for plantation owners. As America began to form, laws supporting use of force were created and woven into our Constitution.
In 1667, it was written into the law for the state of Virginia by Anglican men, so Christian men, because the debate was whether slaves or enslaved Africans could be proselytized, because if they were proselytized, it was customary, according to Anglican tradition, that Anglican and Christian brothers and sisters could not enslave one another. So if that's the standard of practice, that says when you come to enslave Africans, you don't recognize their humanity, nor do you see them as, if they are baptized and welcomed into the faith, they're not your brothers and sisters in Christ.
Between 1840 and early 1900s, policing was under tight control of the political elite. The communities most targeted by harsh policing tactics were recent European immigrants. As African Americans fled the horrors of the Jim Crow South, they too became victims of brutal and punitive policing in the northern cities where they sought refuge. 6 million black people fled to the northern cities in the Great Migration. Yet the racism by police continued, based on bias limiting black people's civil rights.
My people come here from Texas and from North Carolina. If you were black in the Bay Area, you came from the South. Why did you come from the South? Because in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, our parents and grandparents were fleeing the violence of the Ku Klux Klan and racist police, and they got on a train and took the train to the last stop to get as far away from these white vigilantes in the South, and the last stop was the West Oakland train station. And that's how a lot of black people came here to work on the Naval Shipyard in Oakland, Hunters Point Shipyard in San Francisco. So black people come here from the South fleeing racial violence.
My father grew up in Alabama, and he had several horrible experiences with the police, and he would often talk about that. I didn't talk about them with the hope that we would hate the police. He spoke about them to explain to us where he came from, the environment that he grew up in, why he left Alabama, how he came to New Jersey, and what motivated him to make sure that his family would do better.
We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality.
People who live in poverty and people of color have experienced a set of relations with the criminal justice system that people who look like me and people who live in my neighborhood and people who have professional jobs and who are white can't even understand. We can't even empathize because we can't even possibly conceive of a police officer who, to me, would never be disrespectful or unpleasant, how that police officer might behave differently on the other side of town or with a person who fits a different profile.
This is the stuff that's been happening for years, for decades. And members of the Black community have been saying that this has been happening. With the increase in phone cameras, with body cameras, people are seeing the truth. People are seeing what Black communities had always known, is that there are a large number of very abusive officers. And so we're finally seeing the stories that we've been told.
Back up! Back the fuck up!
According to Kentucky law, the use of force by Mattingly and Cosgrove was justified to protect themselves. This justification bars us from pursuing criminal charges in Miss Breonna Taylor's death.
Please don't be too nice. Like when you guys put somebody in the car and you're protecting their head, you know, the way you put their hand over. Like, don't hit their head, and they've just killed somebody, don't hit their head. I said, you can take the hand away, okay?
Officer Edward Nero has been acquitted of all charges for his role in the 25-year-old black man's death.
A police officer was found not guilty in the shooting death of a black driver.
You know, my brother ain't have no gun. No gun. Why couldn't just be a man and said I made a mistake?
No mistakes made. If we look at the Laquan McDonald shooting, in Laquan McDonald, we saw eventually that the officer was lying, that there were lies in reports. But the police department hid that. The government hid that from the people, from the defense attorneys. It required some professors from University of Chicago to force that material out and into the public.
Today's political climate has carried on the tradition of protecting those police officers who have been accused of excessive use of force. The killing of Breonna Taylor by undercover police is another example.
But as the president pointed out, and as we all know, I think logically, 99%, if not more, of the police contact with the public is appropriate.
The policies of local, state, and federal governments have made policing harder than ever. Many young officers join the force with good intentions. Some end up poorly trained and negatively influenced by their superiors in a culture of intimidation and protecting their own. This results in escalation between law enforcement and the communities they serve. In Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, where our country's laws are created, and democracy and equal rights under the law are the foundation of our criminal justice system, Metropolitan Police Department is a prime example of bad training and an outdated culture. The agency has had a history of excessive use of force, over-policing, and dehumanizing stop and frisk policies. This culture has made it hard to train and keep young officers with the potential to make a positive change.
My dad was a police officer with DC for about 30 years. I was never pushed by him to become one, but as time went on and I got older, I decided it was something that I was interested in doing. You know, when I first started, everyone was kind of motivated and, you know, we're gonna do some good here. But as time went on, there was so much pressure coming from the top to get these stats. I mean, we were making, on average, 8 to 10 arrests a day, and we worked 5 days a week.
Sean Logicano has been fighting to keep his job as a D.C. police officer. Today we learned D.C. police aren't having it. You may remember this video. We first showed you last year.
3856, 3856. All right, man, let him do his thing. No, he grabbing my shit. Come on, man. He don't got nothing on him. He don't got nothing on him. He all right? Yeah, don't do that.
You see the video and you're like, what the hell is this? This is horrible. That's how I learned to search like that, was from officers, because, you know, as a rookie officer, you're very timid. So when you get out on the street, you're searching people, you don't really get that much training on how to search. In fact, I made the argument at my trial board, there was no simulation for how to conduct a proper search. You know, it was basically like, there's no wrong or right way to do it, just make sure it's thorough. It's not like I take pleasure in that. If they didn't keep it there, I wouldn't search it. I wouldn't search there. But you know, unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast when it comes to drugs and drug dealing, because they know most officers don't want to check there because it's a very uncomfortable private spot. Obviously, as you saw from the video, he was very uncomfortable and felt very violated, and you know, we ended up leaving. He didn't get arrested, and he filed a complaint.
We're tired of being harassed every single day because you think, talking about the officers here, you think that there's more going on than what's going on. There's nothing going on but a group of guys enjoying their community.
It was investigated by the department, and I was cleared for that incident. Believe it or not, they gave me what's called a letter of prejudice. It's a small corrective action letter basically saying, hey, you know, you should have done better, and you should have just arrested him for drinking in public. So not only did they say, hey, everything about that search was okay, but you shouldn't have used your discretion, and you should have basically arrested him for some petty little offense.
Although Logicano was disciplined for this search, the department ultimately moved to fire him for a second similar search, caught on body-worn camera video, but not publicly available. Logicano's defense argued the department's decision to fire him was a knee-jerk reaction to the public outrage over that viral cell phone video we first showed you a year ago. The attorney telling the panel they understand the department's position, but Logicano should not be the fall guy.
I mean, I was, you know, certainly stunned, caught off guard for sure, and felt very betrayed by the department for sure. It's probably not the popular answer, but I stand by what I did on that day. That's how I was trained, and if I was told differently, I would be the first person to do it differently. If this is a problem, what steps have you taken to rectify the fact that there are dozens of people now sitting in jail on drug charges as a direct result of my searches, which have been consistent across the board, and you've now decided that that's an improper search? So to me, that's signaling all of those cases should be relooked at.
There is this thing that we call the proximity rule, and what it means is that the person that is closest to the error, or the thing that is closest to the error, normally gets blamed for it in totality. I have to dispute that, because what ends up happening, and what we know to be true, is that the officer is usually a result of a lot of problems that went wrong, and now that is being acted out in that officer's performance.
The training of police officers, whether it was military police officers when I was an Army prosecutor, or the many, many law enforcement officers and agencies I worked with as a federal prosecutor in DC. And it's not just the Metropolitan Police Department, MPD. They are the local crime fighters in the district. And, you know, different agencies, I think, have different abilities when it comes to training their officers. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Just like most of the police officers I worked with in my career were good. They took their oath seriously. They were there to protect and serve. But boy, the bad ones, you know, I've always said it's not like one bad apple that you can pick out of a barrel and enjoy the rest of the apples. It's like a drop of poison in a pot of chili.
Becoming a police officer has long been considered a noble and selfless profession. Police officers have been held in high esteem. However, over time, that has changed. Policing today has become more dangerous and challenging, putting their lives at risk. We have seen police officers' heroic efforts time and time again. The work of police has helped keep many communities safe.
Phoenix police officers respond just moments after a man crashes into a tree and is trapped inside his burning SUV.
A Texas police officer who used to work in the Houston area is a survivor of the Las Vegas shooting. A piece of shrapnel struck his hand.
But that did not stop him from saving lives.
Started on Sunday with someone reporting that a man was threatening to jump, but News 6 reporter Clay Lepard spoke with a deputy and helped bring that man down safely.
Tonight, new video of Denver police responding to a shots fired call when one officer is hit. That wounded officer is dragged behind a car as a fellow officer stands watch with a rifle. But seconds later, the suspect opens fire again. The second officer goes down. Police return fire.
Watch how the officer who first sees the gun has the presence of mind to fall backwards out of harm's way while keeping his firearm trained on askins. He squeezes the triggers several times.
A man that won't help. You won't help. I won't help. Here I am in front of you. No coincidences. I'm here to help you. I'm gonna step down. I'm not fitting to rush you at all. I just want to... Come here, man.
That's when all hell breaks loose.
No!
He pulls a gun on the officer. She begs for her life.
No! No, please don't do me!
Machete. An officer pursues. The man with the machete then turns back and starts to chase the officer.
Don't do it!
Fires,
Don't
but the
do
man
it!
pushes forward. The machete still in hand. The officer runs into the street, trips and falls. With the armed man standing over him, several other officers open fire.
The demands of the job are stressful. Long shifts, encounters with violent offenders. It can be a thankless job.
Growing up, my interactions with police officers have changed. I've had the opportunity to make some really good friends when we go on the road and we travel with police officers. I've had a lot of good conversations with officers, and I try to understand just how hard their job is. When you are tasked with the force of protecting and serving, you're gonna go and face some danger, and you have to always be ready because they have families, they're regular people, that have a tough job. But then, looking back on some of the videos and things that happen, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, how does that happen? Like a Walter Scott video. My man is running away and gets shot in the back. To me, I feel like a cop, his main job is to make sure that environments are safe. And that's a tough duty, and that's great. But my man gets pulled over for a taillight, and there's an interaction, and all we know is what we see on the video, and we see him running away, and he gets shot in the back, multiple times. And it's like, well, I think the court system should have some say in this. I think that whatever he did wrong, he has the chance to go in front of a jury and be held at trial and let the court system, do what it does. Now, a lot of times the court system has failed Black people as well, but I'd rather be failed by the court system than be shot in the back. There has to be, when is force necessary?
So I wanted to become a police officer because when I was a young teenager, I recall sitting on the front steps of my home with my brother. And we lived on a very quiet street, but within earshot, it was a pretty busy street, majority African-American neighborhood. And we had seen, the police frequently in our neighborhood. But on this particular day, our friends were walking down the street. They passed our house, we saw them, waved, nothing, no greater conversation than that. But shortly after they passed us, the police stopped them. A police car pulled up on them, the officers got out of the car. There were two white officers, began to verbally abuse my friends. And my brother and I, and my cousins actually were with me too. We were sitting there trying to figure out what was going on. As the conversation continued with the police and my friends, we could see that everyone was agitated, up to a point where the police officers slapped and assaulted my friends. Now I'm sitting there with my cousins and my brother, and we felt completely powerless. So we watched this interaction, and it ended up where no one got arrested. Our friends weren't placed in the car, and the police left the scene. But it left this indelible mark on me, looking at this situation, again, feeling powerless for myself, but also feeling that I couldn't do anything to help my friends. I recalled at that point that my father was in the driveway a little bit further up working on the car, so I ran to him, and I had tears in my eyes. And I said, Dad, I have to tell you what just happened. And I went through the whole story, and I explained to him what went on, and the friends getting slapped, and the powerless feeling. And I said to him, man, somebody's got to do something about this. And my father at that point was working on the car, was fixing the oil, and he slowly closed the hood, and he wiped the oil off his hands, and he looked at me, and he said, when God gets you to the point where you feel that someone has to do something about it, you are the someone. And the something, well, that's for you to figure out. At that point, I knew that I had to go to the police department. And in my mind, I thought I could fix all the ills of bad police performance by joining the police department. But I knew at that point that that's what I needed to do.
Today's police force looks very different from one of decades ago. There is more diversity in its ranks, more leaders who are Black and brown, many of them called to make a change in their community. While cities across America struggle with reform, some communities and law enforcement leaders have started to embrace the changes being called for.
We really have to focus on culture internally in the police department. You could bring all the diversity into the department that you want, but if you have a culture that's not inclusive, then it really doesn't matter. You're gonna still have the same kind of, you're gonna have the same culture that you've already had, and you're gonna, people are gonna do the same thing that they've already done. Our focus here at the Richmond Police Department has been on building relationships with the community, because that's how we feel like we can prevent crime and solve crimes when they do happen. We look at policy and really look at what the community is asking of us to make sure that our policies and procedures reflect that. So we have kind of a different community policing model than a lot of other departments, in which everything we do is community policing, not just a program or a few officers. It's difficult to bring people of color into this profession, especially with everything that's going on, just not just now, but really over the last 5+ years with Ferguson and all the other departments. So, how do I tell somebody that looks like me to, come join, and then they come to, a department or, like departments all across the nation that are predominantly white or have a lot of, officers that are not of color, and, how do I tell you, yes, come work and we're gonna do great things, and we are gonna do great things in the community, and you have the unique ability to connect, but they don't want to see themselves as wearing this uniform because they know what the representation is. They know that the history of systemic oppression by people that wear this uniform. And while there's many of us that wear this uniform that look like me, have not participated in that, we know that the history of our profession has. And so that's difficult to overcome. It's difficult for those of us who do wear this uniform to reconcile with that fact that, yeah, we're part of this system that has oppressed our communities. But there's also the opportunity to change that. How can we change that moving forward? What can I do now as a chief of police to put in policies and practices within my organization so that we no longer have that system of oppression here in the city of Richmond?
Smartphone and body camera technology have captured the many instances of excessive use of force that people in Black and brown communities already knew. Social media has amplified and exposed these crimes. Without these tools, making police and prosecutors more accountable to the public will remain in the shadows. America, with all its power, wealth, and knowledge, has the ability to turn around a centuries-old issue that can forever bring our communities together. The killing of Black men and women during traffic stops needs immediate solutions.
Cameras don't lie. And I think that the advent of social media, of putting it in the homes and on the devices, because people live on the devices now, it's not anything you can escape. It's not anything you can hide. I think that there's some positivity that comes with that. I do feel, though, at the same time, that if people want to make a change, and it's always kind of funny because you really can't tell anyone how to feel or how they should protest or what they should do because you really don't know what happened to them and what they have experienced. I do think some other strategies could be applied, and that protest is just one form or one part of the solution, but there are other approaches that may be necessary as well.
The public has a feeling that when they tell us that they want us to increase transparency, that we understand it for what they're saying, but we actually understand it for what they're meaning. And what they mean is that they don't actually trust us. They want to see that what we're doing matches what we're saying. So body cameras and the proliferation of body cameras throughout law enforcement has been extreme. And I think it's a good thing. We want to show the public that we not only have integrity with our report writing and our actions, but we want to be able to prove that. But not only to defend ourselves, we want to take a look at body cameras in a way that I don't think they've been utilized well enough, and that is as a performance management measure. We'd like to be able to take a look at what officers are doing to determine if their performance matches our expectations. If it does, then that's great. We should commend them. We should let them know that they're doing a great job. If it doesn't, what we don't want to do is just look for them doing something bad. We want to obviously take a look at some of those pre-incident indicators to behavior to see if we can sort of stop them along the way, send them in the right direction, give them better guidance, and more importantly, sit the officer down and have them look at their performance. It's amazing what will happen when you tell a person that, listen, I don't think you did this the right way. For law enforcement officers, because we are so used to people combating us, our initial action or reaction is going to be, I didn't do that. I did it right. The ability to see yourself in action, to see that maybe you took a left turn when you should have taken a right turn, and it allows you to understand that we're not out here trying to hurt you, that the executives within the agency and the supervisors are there to improve performance, ultimately hoping to improve service delivery to the public.
Body cameras are not a panacea. I mean, the panacea would be to stop the abuse in the first place. And the problem with body cameras is there are no generalized rules. It's that every department does it their own way. If we look at the Laquan McDonald shooting, in Laquan McDonald, we saw eventually that the officer was lying. But that went on for a year or so. So sometimes they know what's on there, they know it's bad, and they refuse to release it. You know, I'm not going to give them the excuse that there's too much video to look at. They don't have time to look at it. They don't have the resources to look at it. We give our law enforcement agencies an enormous amount of money. It's how they decide to use it. You know, they'd prefer to use it to buy new toys than it is to investigate allegations of misconduct.
As the world reckons with what policing looks like today, reimagining 21st century policing has been the call to action by citizens, politicians, and law enforcement leaders.
There should be a social contract between the community and the people who are being served by the law enforcement and law enforcement to ensure that there's a meeting of the minds. And what are the tools that you're using? So for example, when President Obama was in office, we stopped the practice of giving military-style equipment to local law enforcement, believing that that only escalates the situation. And one of the other recommendations in the report was to encourage law enforcement to get out of their car. Well, first of all, to hire local law enforcement from the community, so they know who are the leaders in the community, and then encourage them to get outside of their cars, walk the streets, go into the schools, let people see them when there isn't a crisis so that they build relationships. And that is the foundation of the bond of trust. You can't get people to cooperate with you if there are crimes in a community if they don't think that people are going to be treated fairly. And so it actually impedes law enforcement's ability to do their job.
Community policing is a great concept because when the officers know the communities that they are expected to police, and when they're interacting with the folks every day, not just when something goes wrong, but when everything is going right, when things are calm and quiet, that's going to build important relationships.
I had an interesting conversation with someone that I would consider to be a friend. And he said to me that when we were in seminary school, he was intimidated by me because I destroyed his narrative of what an African-American male is. He grew up in South Carolina just like me, and he had a certain vision a certain image of what a black man was. I upset all of that. And then he began to say, I would love to invite you to my congregation, and I would, sort of laud praises on you for, coming out of Hartsville, South Carolina and accomplishing what you accomplished. And I said, hold on, sir. I said, don't do that. Because if you look at me as an anomaly because of my education and what I've been able to do, what you're doing is now creating a cycle where you see me differently from any other African-American man, and that's the problem. What you need to do is see my humanity just like you see anyone else's humanity.
More and more, citizens are coming up with tech solutions, products and services that are helping address the issue. There are those already at the forefront of this effort, trying to make communities safer.
Not Reaching is a vehicle identification pouch. It holds your license, registration, and insurance. It clips to your driver's side air vent. So when an officer comes to your car during a traffic stop, you do not have to reach. Officers have said that this is what makes them nervous and escalates their traffic stops. So on July 6th of 2016, we're at home celebrating our son's 30th birthday, and Philando Castile is in Minnesota losing her son to a routine traffic stop. And that was the day I said, that's it. We have to come up with a solution. It has to be something out there. So after interviewing police officers, they all said the same thing. What is it that makes you nervous during a traffic stop? They all said, reaching. And that's how we came up with Not Reaching, not knowing 2 years later I would find out that Philando's last words before he died were, I wasn't reaching.
Our policing systems are out of control. They are not regulated. There is not the appropriate accountability measures. If every time an officer interacts with a community member, there's a risk that that community member could end up dead, and there's never accountability for that officer, you are never going to be able to have the kind of safety that you're talking about.
We have a violent crime rate of approximately 300 to 400 people every year across administrations. And that's what it's looked like for years and years and years. Dumping money into criminal justice. What if we move that money into building people up instead of tearing people down? Because the current system just isn't working. We don't have the greatest criminal justice system in the world. We shouldn't be locking up more people than pretty much every single country in the world. We shouldn't be destroying Black lives and Black communities and Latino lives and Latino communities. So what do we have to lose by actually doing something different that actually makes common sense?
The American people can't have confidence in the police force when you have the Eric Garners and the Philando Castiles and the George Floyds, and you could name how many names, dozens, hundreds, thousands of names. So when I see Congress taking up things like banning chokeholds, well, that's wonderful. But that's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping chest wound. What I think needs to be done, based on what I saw in my 30 years as a prosecutor, is the kind of intense, systemic reform that partners the police with those being policed.
The Gen Zers and the and the millennials have a certain respect for humanity that I think may be a little different from, prior generations. Given George Floyd's case, people saw him as a human being for the first time. It's sad that he has to be recognized as a human being when he is in a helpless state, because he should be respected as one as he was walking. And all of this over a supposed counterfeit $20 bill.
Imagine a room filled with 13 to 17-year-old students of color brainstorming how they can use technology to make a positive impact to their community. My first introduction into the world of technology was a Kino Labs hackathon. But there was a question that was posed to me at that event. It was, could an app have saved Trayvon Martin?
I created CopStop in 2015. It was born out of the idea that we need to figure out how to alleviate this overwhelming sense of anxiety that Black folks get and other folks of color get when you're talking to an officer after he or she pulls you over. It's ridiculous that you can feel like you're frozen, you know? That these folks that you're supposed to call after anything happens, that you feel like they're ready to kill you, you know? So I had to figure out some step in the right direction to create a solution for it. I was invited by the chief of police to give a presentation on CopStop, my experience with officers, why I felt there was a need for the application, and how the officers can use it to regulate their own behaviors and keep themselves accountable at the same time as how community members are gonna use it for their own safety. And I can definitely share I was nervous, like I was scared, because it was my first time speaking to a group of officers about an app called CopStop, and I am Black. That opportunity was really, really eye-opening because that happened when I was 15 years old.
From all of the workshops and projects that I've done, they all stem from the same idea of defining your own reality. I practice that through technology creation. We can use technology as a platform to build an educational system without the influence of white supremacy. I know it's uncomfortable, but if you've been waiting for someone to tell you it's time to keep questioning, let it be me. Curiosity doesn't always lead to death. In truth, it can be the strongest catalyst for change. Thank you.
We've pleaded, we've prayed, we've worshiped, we've begged, we've marched, and it does not appear to resonate, right, with large numbers of white Americans. That race relations is their problem to solve.
I think that people need to take a deep breath, and they need to start having conversations like this to really understand everybody's viewpoint.
In the future, I hope I don't have to see video after video of police disrespecting, dehumanizing, hurting, killing, and injuring folk on the street.
It's going to take mayors and police chiefs who are committed to recognizing that there's a problem, not trying to pretend it doesn't exist. It does exist.
It is a real emphasis on getting our white counterparts to, at the very least, understand that these things are real for us.
It's time now that we really need to listen to the voices of those who have the worst assumptions about the justice system, the worst assumptions about policing.
America, to have justice for all. Don't think of a person's color, think of them being a human. They'll treat a dog better than they'll treat a human being.
Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty.
Catch me if you can't understand, it's a new day. Life is real, but we still gotta get paid. Take it back to the simple things, like love and laughter, fuck the bullshit games. Stand up to a man, yes, I can't take my place. Don't let that chess play fool ya. Put your picture in a frame. It's time to step into this double Dutch game.